Welcome to Amara Farms.
We are in our tomato greenhouse. This is how we grow tomatoes. I moved to Canada in 1973. So,
how old were you?
I was 3.
3 years old.
I now speak 5 languages.
Come on.
Yeah.
Say hello to me in
สวัสดีค่ะ เป็นยังไง สบายดีไหม?
Yeah, that sounds authentic. Hey, and we're back on Vibes and Visas with me, your host, Charlie Karomi, and the one, the only Arzeena. How you doing?
Good.
So, before we begin talking about your travels all over the world, where are we right now?
We are in our garlic drying barn. So this used to be a hay barn, but we don't grow hay anymore. But we do grow about 8,000 garlic. So this is how we dry it. We use all the rafters and all the space that we can. And in about 3 weeks, the garlic will be dried enough that we can start cleaning it, trimming the roots, and selling it.
Nice.
Yeah.
I've realized one of the things I didn't ask you before, which I feel like I should, Amara Farm is 100% organic.
Yeah.
What does that really mean? Because not everyone knows what organic means.
Yeah. So organic means that we don't use any synthetic inputs in production. So our seed is certified organic. We use only natural fertilizers, no chemicals. There's no synthetic pesticides used. In fact, we don't spray any pesticides, even the natural ones. We do prevention as much as possible. And if something gets attacked by insects, it's like, wasn't meant to be.
Yeah.
So it's basically our food is grown in a very natural way. We feed the soil and try and make the soil as healthy as possible so that it gives us healthy food.
Okay. And why the shift to organic? Not just for Arzeena, but for the world. Why is organic better?
There's so many things going on in the world. Pesticides, many of the pesticides that when I went to university, we were told were safe.
Yeah.
Suddenly we know more about them.
Yeah.
So, I think it's really important for people to understand how much that people think is okay is actually not. Things like even herbicides. Yeah. When I went to university, why would a herbicide be bad for humans?
Yeah.
We're not plants.
Yeah.
There are much bigger mechanisms that we just didn't understand. So that's one. The other thing is, when you grow organically and you are feeding the soil, you're putting a lot of nutrition in the soil. You're putting a lot of carbon in the soil. So soils on organic farms tend to be very carbon rich, and that's what the world really needs right now. We need to pull more of that carbon out of the atmosphere and put it back in the soil.
Yeah.
So those techniques are all so incredibly important right now.
Okay, beautiful. Yeah. Of course, if you want to learn even more about the amazing organic farming that's going on here at Amara, they can go to the website.
Yes, amarafarm.ca.
There you go, amarafarm.ca. Okay, so where were we in the story? So Arzeena has been born in kule mkoa Iringa, Tanzania, and then she moved to Richmond.
Yes.
And then she joined a university that has a very Irish-sounding name. Guelph.
Yes.
The University of Guelph.
Yeah.
Where is that?
That's in Ontario, about an hour and a half west of Toronto.
Nice. How did your parents feel about you moving all the way across the country for school?
That wasn't the part that upset them. It was the studying agriculture. I had very good marks going into school. Yeah. And, as the immigrant parent, they want you to be doctor, lawyer, or accountant, engineer.
Engineer, you have to, mechanical or aeronautical. They can settle for one of those.
And I could have gone to any of those, but I chose to do agriculture, and that was my parents' confusion. Like, how do we tell our friends? What are you doing, right? So for the longest time, they still didn't understand. But, when I was in high school, my grade 12 biology teacher heard that I really wanted to work overseas and to do some community development work. And at the time, I thought I would study botany. And when he heard what I was doing, he said, "Why aren't you studying agriculture?" And I hadn't even thought that was something that you could do, because I grew up in a very urban environment. My mom is a teacher. My dad worked for an importing business, so that's very far removed from a farm. But as soon as I thought, oh, yeah, actually, that makes sense. That would, I would have a skill that I could give back. So then I went to study, find out what universities I could study at.
Yeah.
And I looked at back then you had curriculums, like book forms of what, the universities provided. There was no internet. And the University of Guelph, in third year, you could take a minor in tropical agriculture. And the main focus course was a field trip to Jamaica.
Hey!
So I was like, I'm there. Jamaica, and learning, hands-on tropical agriculture. And it's a good thing because on that field trip is where I met my husband. So
I love it.
Yeah.
So you met your husband in Jamaica.
And my husband's also an immigrant. He's actually a newer immigrant than me, but he's from Northern Ireland, so nobody thinks he's the immigrant.
What was he doing in Jamaica?
I mean, he was on the same course.
Same thing.
So we went in the same university. University of Guelph is an agricultural university.
Yeah.
He was studying soil science. I was studying crop science. We were in the same year, but our class is a class of 300. So we never met each other until we were on this course. And then, on the bus, he started speaking, and my good friend David was with me, and I was like, there's English coming out of this man's mouth, but I have no idea what he's interpret. So my friend my ear was not, he had a very thick Northern Irish accent, and I was like, I don't understand what you're saying. So I had to have an interpreter sitting in between us for a good few days, and then your ear gets used to it.
I'm not even sure you know an Irish accent. Is that Sean Connery-ish?
No, that's Scottish.
That's Scottish.
You know who? Liam Neeson. Do you know?
Yes.
So Liam Neeson is from the same town as my husband.
Oh, they are?
Yeah,
nice.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Liam Neeson.
Yeah.
How you doing, Conan? Is it all right? Everything's all right. Hi, I'm Liam Neeson. I'm from Ballymena, County Antrim, and I talk like this.
So you had food in your mouth.
So when he speaks in a very thick accent, his native accent, that's the Northern Irish accent.
Okay, but it's beautiful.
Yeah.
From Ireland, you're from Canada, you met in Jamaica.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. I love that story. And you finished your course at Guelph.
Yep.
Then you decided, you know what, let's even go farther away. Now you went to...
Well, the whole purpose of going to school.
Yeah,
we started working as CUSO volunteers. So for folks who don't know CUSO, it's kind of like the Peace Corps, but Canadian. So we went with CUSO to Thailand.
I don't think we have anything even like the Peace Corps in Kenya.
Yeah.
So you get a team from a Canadian university or Canadian young people?
It's basically Canadian professionals.
Yeah.
You are matched with an organization in a host country that needs your skills.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a matchmaking service. They've got job descriptions, and I matched with one in central Thailand. Neil matched in the north. So we were lucky we were in the same country because we weren't married at the time. And then you go and work with them. First you 3 months of language training.
Yeah.
And then you are immersed in working in the office. Like technically I was working for the Thai government.
Yeah.
And then you start doing your thing, working with farmers. Yeah.
And that's when you realized, I think you told me earlier, that when you're in Richmond, you didn't really feel like you weren't authentically Canadian.
Yeah.
But when you went abroad and you told people that you were Canadian,
that's when I think they were like, no, you're not really, you're Indian.
Yeah.
And no one had actually kind of in my face said that to me. I'm like, no, but
Canadian, but okay.
So in some ways I think they felt they were ripped off. They didn't get the real Canadian. So it took a while. right?
It's like our order just shipped. This is not what we
faulty,
ordered. Please, this
overcooked.
Is not. But that's so the fact that, and I think it's a positive note for Richmond and Canada in general. The fact that here you are Canadian and you're accepted as Canadian.
Yeah.
It's like people outside have a problem aligning, seeing you as Canadian, but Canadians see you. You are Canadian.
Yeah.
So Canadians, Canada isn't doing so bad. It's beautiful.
It is.
To some extent.
To some extent. I mean, we have to fast forward. When you start getting out of the urban environments, then things change, right? Coming here is different.
It's different.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll talk about, you know what? Because that's also, you have to talk about the good and the bad as well.
Sure.
And we'll talk about how when you moved out of the city, out of the more cosmopolitan area to the more rural areas where people aren't that exposed to outside cultures.
Exactly.
That's when some trouble starts. Okay, we'll talk about that. But for now, we're in Thailand. You worked in Thailand for how?
2.5 years.
2.5 years. Was this before or after your master's?
Before.
Before.
Yeah.
And then you went to the UK for your master's.
So Neil, being from the UK, he could study as a domestic student. I was an international student.
Yeah.
And we found a university that we could do a master's that both of us really wanted to do. So I did mine in sustainable agriculture. Neil did his in rural resources and environmental policy. And yeah, it was interesting living in the UK. I love visiting. I don't enjoy living there.
How come? Is it the weather?
The food? No, because I'm from the West Coast. I love misty, wet. Like, I love that weather. But the food is crap, except the Indian food, right? Or the shawarmas, right?
Yeah.
It's expensive.
Yeah.
You know, and this is where you realize, like, oh, I grew up on the West Coast where, like, you know, you're active all the time. You're out walking and hiking or swimming or you're doing things. And in the UK, not so much.
Not a lot,
That's not part of the culture. You finish at school and they're like, okay, see you at the pub. And I'm like, again? Like, I don't drink this much.
But you have to understand that Canada, I feel like, is the exception to the rule. Because being from Kenya, that's Kenyan culture.
Oh my God.
Kenyans don't like biking and running and hiking. We don't do a lot of that. Let me speak for Nairobi, in the capital. It's like Friday after work, it's like you don't go like, oh, I'll see you at the lake, or oh, we'll see you. No, it's I'll see you at the bar.
But here's the difference. Monday, see you at the bar. Tuesday, okay, we'll see you at that bar. You know, Wednesday, oh, let's go to this pub. And it's just like, wow, in the UK, like that is their coffee house, right? Here, I think we're like, let's go for coffee. I think in Canada, we drink coffee, tea to socialize a bit more. Whereas in the UK, they're very big on their pints, right?
Okay, I see. So UK is nice. You liked visiting? But not stay there.
It's not my thing. Yeah.
So you did your master's. Have your wild travels ended? Did you stop in Europe or did you go someplace else?
No, we went. So
where did you?
Of course.
Your passport was just there getting stamped to death.
This is why we studied, right? I actually got a scholarship from CETA, our Canadian International Development Agency, to do my master's research in India. So we went to Gujarat State, which is where my family's originally from. I found an organization to host us so that we could do our field research. So we were there for a year. Yeah.
How did it feel? And this is very interesting. How did it feel being what's the word? Like ethnic? What's the word I'm looking for?
I'm ethnically Indian.
Being ethnically Indian. Wow, that's a mouth. Ethnically. Being ethnically Indian and now living in India. How did that feel?
It still felt weird. And that's where the surprise, right? You know, you think, oh, I'm going to the motherland, you know. But culturally, I grew up Canadian. So, you know, after work, I'd want to go for a run, like just to like have some exercise. And I was in a rural area, and like everyone thought I was crazy. So they knew, like, this is not the Deshi girl. Like, she's not from here. Because like I'm running in my dupatta and salwar kameez. They're just like,
why are you running?
Why are you doing this? Like, I still wanted to try and keep healthy. My husband and I, like, we share a lot of like the household work. So, you know, when it comes to cooking and cleaning, our neighbors would come in and find Neil like cooking, and they'd be like,
what's wrong?
They'd like run away, and 2 seconds later they get a camera and they'd come and take photographs of Neil like rolling out pizza dough, and he's just like, did I do something really wrong? Like, no, but so there were all these cultural differences that you're like, oh, things have changed, right? So that was, and so a little bit unexpected, but yeah.
Was there any pressure to be, like, to exhibit Indianness?
A little bit, because, we were doing our research, which requires, interviewing farmers. And then you need to have like a trust and a rapport. So the good thing is, like, Neil's Irish, he tells really good jokes in every language, right? He can make people laugh. So part of it, like, he had that thing. And I had to be a little bit more docile and not be as exuberant, take the notes and do that kind of thing. Because it would be very unusual for me to be the jokey kind of person. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I guess that's the more traditional, cultural, like.
Yeah. But again, because I was in a rural area, and Gujarat state is also, conservative, very conservative state. So, it was good.
Is living in one country, does living in one foreign country prepare you for the experience for living in another one?
Yeah, it does. It does, because you get a little bit more adept at watching for the cues, the cultural cues, so that you can code switch. Like, in India, I have to be a little bit more passive. Otherwise, you draw some very nasty attention, right? Or in the UK, you just drink with everybody. Just shut up about pub, right? And in Thailand, similarly, there is culturally, it's a very soft culture, right? You can't be very too pushy or too aggressive. And so it's so interesting watching how the different cultures, how people react with each other, what is the cultural norm. So I think it prepares you to kind of figure some of this stuff out. And if you want to fit in, or at least be comfortable, you look for these. So it actually prepared me more for coming here, because I understood that this is a different culture from what I even grew up in Richmond. Even though we're in the same country, in the same province.
But it's a different culture.
In the Comox Valley, it's a very different culture.
Yeah, okay. You became a bit more culturally flexible.
Yeah.
You're a bit more, okay. I love that. I love that. Before you finish up on this and move into now life in rural Canada, something that I want to ask you is, there are a lot of people who dream about working all over the world and traveling everywhere and doing all of that, basically doing what you were doing in your, was that 20s and 30s?
Yeah.
So doing what you did. So questions for you. Pros and cons of living and moving and working everywhere. And then also, if someone wants to find opportunities to do that, what's a general outlook on life that they should have?
Sure.
If that question makes sense. So the first one, pros and cons.
Pros. Okay, so pros, obviously, you get to really immerse yourself in different cultures. So now, when I travel, I don't do my parents travel as well, but they go on cruises and they step down and do a day tour and then they go back on a cruise. That drives me insane. I really want to know the culture a little bit more and get to eat in authentic restaurants and go in by the wayside and really find out what these people are like. So I don't like doing the very touristy things. But that type of lifestyle, you learn what the culture is really about. You learn languages. You get to really know what makes people happy in the different cultures. It's really great. I would say a very big con is if you were working in a profession where you need to have linkages, if you're not self-employed or you need to be hired when you come back to Canada, your international experience will not count for anything when you come back. It's tough. We had a really hard time when we came back trying to get jobs in our field, and because they looked at all of our international experience, it was well, you didn't have it here, so it took a long time, a really long time.
Okay,
So just be aware of that.
I didn't know that because immigrants have that a lot.
Yeah.
Like from back home, you're really established in one profession.
Yeah.
But when you come here, it's like,
No.
sorry.
Yeah. No, because people, and I find this maybe a little bit more on the West Coast, people want local experience. So that's kind of like, that's the hard one. Yeah.
And if someone wants to get themselves in a position to
do that,
Yeah.
you know, CUSO is still around,
Yeah.
so have a look at them. And I often go to the website just to see what's going on with this organization. Amazing opportunities all around the world. A lot more in social justice, in entrepreneurism. Like there's lots of opportunities there. You know, I think here's the thing, though. Now that I've done it, and I see what I could and couldn't do, I don't know if I would do it again, as in terms of trying to do community development work. I think I learned way more than I gave. So if you think you're going to be going to help or to make a difference, probably not as much as you think.
Okay.
Yeah. Trying to make change in a different culture than yours is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
So just contemplate that. I mean, I just think expectations, right? If you are going to learn about a different culture, totally. That's a great reason to go.
You're going to explore.
Yeah. But if you think you're going to make a lot of change, that would be tough.
But that happens in the movies. There's always that foreign hero who swoops in and fixes everything.
Exactly.
You're trying to tell me that Hollywood lied to us.
It doesn't work, man.
Crazy.
Yeah. But you know, sometimes people need to go away to realize that. And then you come back and you're like, oh, so much easier here where I speak the language and I understand the power dynamics and how things actually happen. Because there's so much, even though we lived in Thailand 2.5 years, there's still so much I didn't quite understand. The power shifts and if you don't grow up and live in that culture for long. So,
Okay. So I feel like this is a nice time to take one last break. We've traveled all over the world. You and your husband, you've traveled all over the world. You've seen all of these cultures. But that final trip, it's like, hey, let's go back home. It's like, hey, time out, let's go back home. So when we come back, we're going to talk about the move from urban, more cosmopolitan areas of Canada into the rural areas. This is what my country people would call Ushago. This is the Bundus, basically. Bundus is a more popular word. This is the Bundus. This is like the country. Yeah. This is the country.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that and how different it is from living in Richmond, and how in a weird way it made you an immigrant once again. Like you are once again an immigrant. Once again another. Yeah. Okay, we'll get into that in just a bit. Keep it right here on Vibes and Visas and we will be right back.